May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be always acceptable to you, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer.
Amen.
I have been to St. Andrew's several times, but this is the first time I've been here to confirm and to receive, and it is an exciting evidence that you really mean it when you say, "Come grow with us." And what more appropriate gospel to hear this Sunday as we celebrate all kinds of growth in God's church than the story of Zacchaeus, the arch tax collector, who was so small that he had to climb a sycamore tree in order to be able to see Jesus coming. I believe this is the first New Testament story I learned as a small boy. And I remember being surprised when I got a little older to find out that Zacchaeus wasn't a boy, he was a grown man. But for me, the story made sense because I also knew what it was like not to be able to see over adults, to know what was really going on. Why did the early church tell this story? They told that all the New Testament stories about Jesus are in the New Testament because they're the stories that early Christians told over and over and over again. There are lots of other things that Jesus did and said that aren't in the New Testament. But the ones that are there because they were especially important windows for our spiritual ancestors onto what it was to be a follower of Jesus Christ. So what kind of a window is this story for us? I think that there are several key elements to this story that we are called to pay attention to this morning. First of all, Zacchaeus, we are told, wanted to see who Jesus was. What was Jesus like? What did he look like? What did he sound like? He was curious about Jesus. He desired to see him. That's the first thing. The second thing is that even though he was a wicked man, we got to keep this straight because it doesn't sound so bad to be a tax collector. I mean, in this country, we have people who make their jobs being tax collectors, and we make fun of them, and we moan and groan about income tax time, but it's not a wicked or a criminal thing to be a tax collector. But in the Palestine of Jesus' day, it was wicked, and it might as well have been criminal, because the tax collectors were Jews who were collaborating with the Roman occupiers. The hated Romans invited traders within the Jewish community to collect money for them. And they gave them permission to pocket some of the money for themselves. So everybody hated the tax collectors because they were traitors to their own people and they were getting rich at the expense of their own people. And Luke goes out of his way to tell us that Zacchaeus was not only a tax collector, he was the chief tax collector in Jericho, and he was rich. And we know that the reason he was rich was because he was stealing from his fellow citizens in Jericho. So this is really not a nice guy. And everybody hated him. And Jesus sees him up in the sycamore tree, and he says, "Zacchaeus, come down right away and hurry up, because I'm having dinner with you today." So that's the second thing. Jesus calls Zacchaeus out. And the third thing is that Zacchaeus is so excited that Jesus has paid attention to him and that Jesus is going to be his guest that he blurts out, "Lord, I'm going to give half of my money away to the poor. And I'm going to pay back all the people whose money I took away from them. I'm going to pay them back fourfold." So the third thing about Zacchaeus is that he repents. He's totally turned around because Jesus paid attention to him. The early Christians told this story because they thought it was their story. Every one of them was able to identify with Zacchaeus. First of all, to identify with his longing and his desire to see what Jesus was all about. Now, is that true of you and me? We're here in church on Sunday morning, so presumably we have some longing and hunger to know more about Jesus and to know him better. But what this story is reminding us is that we need to be living ever more deeply into that hunger. We need to feel as if we can't live another day happily unless we know Jesus fully. We are being challenged by this story to do the equivalent of climbing a sycamore tree. Now, what does that mean? Well, that can mean, first of all, actually reading the Bible. Taking the time every day to get to know that work really well. It can mean getting to know the Book of Common Prayer, understanding what our own particular Christian tradition is all about. A lot of Episcopalians pray the Book of Common Prayer every Sunday, but never open it otherwise. But opening that book and opening the Bible and really reading it and thinking about it and struggling with it and noticing the places that we don't like and talking about that with other people is truly a way to begin to get to know Jesus. As we struggle with our tradition and with our scriptures, Jesus comes to meet us and shows himself to us more clearly.